Okay. Uh, First and foremost, welcome to Cash Flow Conversations, where we talk with service based business owners who have a ton of experience in their field. This is the first episode, so I had to bring on a heavy hitter who has amazing knowledge and who truly is a seasoned expert and just an overall awesome person. Robert Chiaffi, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, Brandon, how can I refuse with such an introduction like that? So thank you. You humble me, and it is my distinct honor and pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So, before the podcast, I had sent you over the questions that I would be asking just so, you would be prepped. I do have one question that I thought of that I did not ask you, and it spurred that thought from a LinkedIn post that you made a few days ago. It
Well,
was
listen, I mean, you said this is a service business. This is anybody who works in a service business deals with curveballs every day. So go ahead, pitch. Pitch. I'm ready
for
to take a
sure.
swing.
Awesome. So you made a post a few days ago about I believe it was the ransomware attack,
Yeah.
and how for 18 days it was just utter chaos. So a two-part question
Hmm?
for number one, for those 18 days, how did your day to day really shift from what you would normally have done, and what was that whole experience? Kind of like dealing with your customers and your
Yeah.
partners.
So, just for context, I'm sure some people may not understand exactly what happened. So,
Hmm.
my company is what's known as a managed service provider. We're essentially the outsourced IT for our customers, small and mid-sized businesses, mainly throughout Westchester County. And there's tons of us all across the country. There's an estimated 40,000 of us across the United States, if you can believe that number. Um,
Wow.
so it's a business model that's pretty common. So, and we use a common set of different industry tools. One of those is a Swiss Army knife, if you would, that
Yeah.
allows companies like mine to service and manage and monitor the systems for all of our customers, right? And so the way that works is we have to deploy or install a piece of software on everybody's computer, right? Gives us great visibility onto what's going on, install patches, remote control, do things really quickly, see if problems are about to happen, things like that. Well, some threat actor out in the universe discovered what's called a zero-day exploit, which essentially
Wow.
means a software bug unknown to the entire world, but maybe only known to a very small subset of people, that allowed them to bypass through all of the security settings that we had this thing locked down with, and essentially just march in as a full administrator and used that very Swiss Army knife that I spoke about. It's called
Hmm.
Kaseya VSA, in case anybody wants to look it up. And you can look up Kaseya VSA July 2nd, 2021, and you'll see all the news articles about how this group of threat actors used that Swiss Army knife employed by companies like us across the globe
Mm.
to spread their ransomware. And there were effectively or estimated to be about 1 million computers worldwide that were affected by that attack.
Wow.
So I know there was a little bit of a lead up there. If I took a minute or two to kind of
Yeah.
give you the background, but I think it's important
Of
context.
course.
So there's about 50 or 60 companies like mine across the globe. Some actually, really big. One dealing with a Swedish supermarket called Co-op. Co-op
Yeah, I've
shut
heard of it.
down 500 of their 800 retail stores because of that attack, because all their cash registers were running Windows, and
Wow.
all those cash registers were being managed by a company like mine using that Kaseya VSA software. So this is considered to be the worst case nightmare scenario for a company like mine, not only to be fully compromised ourselves, but to have all of our customers fully compromised by the very tools that we use to do our job, right? Embarrassing, reputational loss. I was very worried about, like, all these lawsuits. I watched my business valuation go from many millions of dollars down to zero or even negative, thinking about the costs and the lawsuits and things like that. So it was 17 calendar days. Who's counting? I am. Um, calendar days where we got about 95% of our systems fully restored. Not just us, like meaning all of our customers. That was 80 customers in 200 physical locations across 4 time zones in the United States.
Wow.
It was a gargantuan effort. 250 servers, about 2,200 desktops and laptops were affected. So we had to restore servers. We essentially had to put Humpty Dumpty back together again for all of our customers. And it was very painful work, right? Because we got the bulk of it back pretty quickly, but it was death by 1,000 cuts, because if you think
Right.
about all the settings and all the little nuanced things that are on your computer, or how things are set up that like take forever and a day to just get right, think about
Of course.
everybody probably replaces their computer, let's say every 5 years, right?
Yep.
We can debate how long that window of time should be, but around every 5 years, you change your computer. Sometimes it's stressful. You don't want to let go of the old computer, even though it's like getting rid of an old car. It's like, I know I got to get rid of this thing. And then you get in
Yep.
the new car and you don't know where all the buttons are and what to like. It takes a little time to get used to it. Same thing with a computer. Like I used to print, used to go to tray 2, not tray 1, or I used to have a little icon here, or my screen was pink and not blue. Like
Right.
and so it was well past that 17 calendar days. It took us really effectively months to get everything kind of polished back to where it should be. So thankfully, we came out the other side of that event. It is considered to be a business-ending event
Mm.
for just about anybody. Not only did we come through the other side of that, I mean, listen, we came through singed. We lost some business because of it. Um, it is what it is. We had other clients that say, thank God we had you on our side,
Of course.
even though they came through your systems, but there was no
Yeah.
fault of ours. But can't think of anybody else that we would have ever wanted to walk through the gates of hell with, other than Progressive Computing, right? These are words that I've heard.
Yeah.
Um, people sending us fruit baskets and food and
Pretty
words of
awesome.
encouragement. It was an incredibly difficult time for all of us, emotionally,
Mm.
psychologically, even physically, the physical toll it was taking on
Of
us.
course.
We were all going 18 hours a day. I had a tech that
Wow.
we, yelled at because we told him go home at like 1 o'clock in the morning, and instead he drove to another client, slept in his car in the parking lot, and then at 6 a.m. walked in their door. So, we don't find out about this until weeks later,
Of
because
course.
just people were so dedicated toward restoring people back to their getting their operations back up and running. We all felt that personal um, need to make sure that everybody
Mm.
was well taken care of. So, when you think about cybercrime and um, really anything technology, you don't think about the emotional human side of things. And so
For
my
sure.
story, which I've given you only a couple of minutes worth of it, really is a human psychological story. And it's a business story. It's not a tech story. People who listen to me, sometimes, I have to warn them, like, I got to warn you in advance. This isn't a technical tale. I'm not going to give you a lot of forensic details about the inner happenings of how this happened, and,
Yeah.
reference code and bytes and bit. Like, no, it's none of that. It's a human survival, business survival kind of story. So it was a really terrible day, and especially if I can bring it back to your topic of being in a service business.
Hmm.
One of the emotions that we felt immediately was we were entrusted we were given the confidence to maintain and monitor and care for all of these systems, essentially the core, the heartbeat of every one of these businesses. And
For
on
sure.
our watch, somebody broke in and beat up all our children, right? And now
Right.
we've come home to, like, everybody's bleeding. Which one do you go to first?
Hmm.
And it was so heart-wrenching to get through this, just feeling so terrible, just so bad that this happened, and just fighting for maintaining relationships and just making people whole again. It was really the one and only thing we could think about for those first 3 weeks, is just make everyone whole and do it as quickly as we can. And so we started on, hey, it's July 3rd. The attack took place July 2nd of 2021. Today is July
Right.
3rd during this recording. July 3rd of that year was a Saturday. Guess what? We were in the office. Nobody went to 4th of July celebrations or
Yeah.
barbecues. None of that took place. All of my plans were canceled, as they should
Yeah.
have been. But it was really tough. It was really tough. Really left some emotional scars as well, Brandon.
Yeah. It sounds extremely challenging. I have no clue what that would have been like because I'm not in the IT space. It almost sounds like you're an employee at SpaceX or, or Tesla with just a very demanding schedule, for
Yeah.
18 days and a lot to deal with psychologically. I think a lot of people kind of forget that part as well.
Yep.
Um, but it sounds like you guys did an amazing job, which I'm not surprised. Wanted to ask what made you go into the IT space? Has this been something that you were always passionate about, or did
Yeah.
you find that over time? Or
As a kid, I was always a tinkerer, right? Uh, if I could point to one thing, maybe the genesis of what makes me what I am today from a professional perspective, right? Or from a technical
Mhm.
perspective. And that was the gift of a box of Legos, probably when I was about 8 years old. First of all, I asked for them. I pined for them. I cried for them. And those are the days where you got a Lego set and it was just like random bricks, right? None of
Right.
these, like, here, go build the Death Star. Like, I was building the Death Star before there were plans, like before
That's
pieces
awesome.
were molded into that, right? And so it was just that sort of, like, maybe taste of engineering back then, of just hours of countless, fun creating abstract art or building castles or just making spaceships. And I know it sounds a little corny, but that was, I think, the start of my um, maybe technical mind forming.
For
I
sure.
have three older brothers. One of them was an electrical engineer in college while he's 10 years older than me. So I was like about 12, like looking over his shoulder all the time, like, what are you doing? He's building little circuit boards at his desk. Even earlier than that. I mean, he would have been 22 already out of college. So even as early as maybe 9, 10, 11,
Wow.
watching him being drawn into that. I used to take apart radios.
Mhm.
When I first started driving, I was like pulling radios out of cars, installing speakers, like just anything electronic
Mhm.
was always just something I felt natural with, and um, felt just very comfortable doing, and I just had a keen interest for it. Computer science degree at Iona now University. And during that time, friends and I had dreamed about, hey, what if we put our heads together and start a tech company, right? What does that look
Mhm.
like? And here I am publicly admitting that we were fools, because we were naive as heck. We had a lot of passion and intelligence, but we didn't really have a good business plan. So it was a few years out of college. My business partner and I decided to put our little side customers that we had collected over the years, just doing like little programming projects or little, computer support stuff back in the early 90s. And we just started the company with this sort of delusion of grandeur and this sort of drive for making something great out of our lives. Now, it was a struggle those first couple of years until we found our own and learned business better, not the business, but learning the
Yeah.
business and learning business in general better as well. And, by the time the 2000s hit is really when we started to hit our stride. Um,
Nice.
this past February, we've marked our 31st anniversary together. So,
Wow.
we've learned a lot, and the business has changed so dramatically over all those years. We're probably in our fifth or maybe now even our sixth iteration of what this company looks like because the
Mm.
technology has changed so much, right? We started before there was an internet. My first two business cards didn't even have an email address on them. Right? How nuts is that? So that's sort of the trajectory of like where I think
Yeah.
I got my start and how we ended up where we are today, which is again where the IT department for small and mid-sized companies. You just outsource everything to us, and we do everything from all that, help desk level type, fix this, this is broken, I have a problem with that, all the way up to strategic management, budgeting, road mapping, um, cybersecurity. We're, starting to get into artificial intelligence and what does that mean?
Yep.
So we take it from a strategic business approach.
Nice. Absolutely. Yeah. It sounds like you're super passionate about what you do and just seeing, or more so hearing about how you've changed and how you've evolved, I think is pretty incredible. And another question that I forgot to send to you, but you just mentioned it, so I'm kind of curious
Yeah,
um, with artificial intelligence. I think it's pretty incredible. Just looking at say ChatGPT, just being able to ask a question and it being able to sort of extrapolate a whole essay or paragraph is just mind-boggling. Have you found uses for AI in what you do for business?
absolutely. But I want to approach this answer from a different direction. So the short answer is yes, we have found value.
Hmm.
The longer answer is that artificial intelligence is, first of all, it's been around for a long time. Believe it or not, AI got its was arguably birthed in 1956 at Dartmouth University. I can
Hmm.
talk about that maybe at another time. I actually put together a whole executive brief video. It's about 40 minutes long where I run through all of the history and then provide high level, C-level business owner, business decision maker kind of information. It's sort of meant to be like an educational class or primer on AI. But AI is not only embedded in the things that we're already using, right? Believe it or not, if you have a Netflix account, Netflix is using AI on you. Same thing with your
Yep.
Amazon account. Siri, Alexa, Google Assistant. My phone just perked up because I said Google. This is what I mean, right? A
Yeah.
Roomba, right? Remember the vacuum cleaning
Yeah.
Roombas?
Of
That's
course.
AI, and that thing hit the market in 2002. Self-driving cars. I mean, it can go on and on and on about all sorts of. If anybody plays computer chess, right? That's a
Of
form of
course.
AI, and we've been doing that since the 90s, by the way.
Yep.
So here's my point is that there are some really cool things that are happening in the field of AI. And what it's really tied to is the power of hardware is starting to enable that software to start to do things at a pretty amazing level because you
Mm.
need massive amounts of processing and massive amounts of storage to do it right. So there are some independent tools, and I kind of mentioned some examples, but Copilot, as an example, if you're a Microsoft 365 subscriber, you could turn on Copilot. You need a license for it, but you can turn it on, and it's like ChatGPT. And you could use that as an independent item, but you'll also notice in some of the Microsoft Office products that they're starting to bring in some AI into that. Um,
Mm.
but then there are independent applications that are based on AI, right? Image creators. I'm trying to give you a really good example of something. Here's an example from Enterprise, right? A bunch of Stanford University students I want to say it was about 10 years ago, created AI to sit on tractors,
Mm,
farm tractors, to a camera that analyzed plants and determined what a good crop is and what a weed was, and then
wow.
programmed an herbicide sprayer to spray very targeted streams of herbicide only at the weed, right?
Wow.
So, like, wow, what a practical use of artificial intelligence in a very, very narrow way. But there are certainly, I mean, we don't all have to be farmers to use AI. And you think about an industry where you'd think AI would land last. But there's tons of tools out there, depending upon the business, that I think a business can enhance their ability to transact and operate with some
Mm,
good tools. But I would caution the audience also to be mindful that the use of artificial intelligence has its dark sides too. So I'll often consult with clients that want to go down this road and say, the first thing we need to do is establish a policy. What does your acceptable use of artificial intelligence look like in your business? What
for
are
sure.
you as an owner, decision maker, shareholder, whatever? What will you tolerate in terms of AI usage? And
Mm,
by the way, what are the dangers of using it that now I walk them through that path of discovering or at least getting their eyes open on where it could potentially be harmful. So let me give you
for
a
sure.
basic case and then we can move on from this. But if I said, hey, I just want to use ChatGPT to allow my employees to help write emails because they're all smart people, but they all stink at writing, right? And a lot of people struggle with writing, right?
Of course.
So, hey, here's an email. It's a tough email to a customer, and I've worded everything, but I need you to soften it up, or I want you to add a little bit of humor or something, right? And you can feed
Right.
that through ChatGPT, and it'll spit something back out at you, actually pretty damn good. But
Yeah.
here's the point. The point is that what I tell people is it's up to you as the human to validate that output. So you do not put your
100%.
name on something unless you have fully read it, so no skimming,
Hmm.
right? Full comprehension here. And when you hit send, you're hitting send, and there's no blaming ChatGPT for this.
Mm,
So having that discussion internally, and I think that's such a super simple example, but having that internal conversation first helps everybody start to frame up how we should be managing and using artificial intelligence. You just don't want to trust this stuff blindly.
for sure. It's so true because, we can take it back to LinkedIn again. I've seen people who, they don't really post on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden, you see them posting articles and these essays and paragraphs every single day. And it was around the same time that Chat GPT came out. So, you
Yeah.
know, there might be a coincidence there.
There may
And
be, and I think you're right. There's definitely a correlation. I don't know if the correlation is causation, but I would with you that the data points seem to show that some people are probably using generative AI like ChatGPT to generate text so that they can, and hopefully they're taking my advice of I'll feed ChatGPT some prompts about what I want to talk about, let it do the
Mhm.
writing, but then I have to proof it.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, it's super, super important to put your stamp of approval
Yeah.
on
And it's not, listen,
anything
there's
that
nothing wrong with
you
that.
say.
Not at all.
Yep, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it adds a lot of creativity to what you're posting,
Sure.
and really, really appreciate your feedback. Another question I had was, obviously we just talked about the attacks that happened about 3 years ago, and it was pretty challenging, but you were obviously able to overcome that. When you first launched your company, were there any major roadblocks that you faced? And if you could kind of give some backstory as to how you
Yeah, I
overcame those.
mean, the roadblock was my own naivete, right? Along with my partner. We were in our early 20s, mid 20s, barely, and there was a lot that we didn't know. I'll flip the question around to maybe more of what if I could go back to my younger self and
Yep.
provide some advice. Ironically, it would be just that: is seek out a mentor to
Hmm.
help guide you through this process. So there was a couple of people we asked, and we got really fortunate because my business partner's cousin had an accountant. I know it sounds like a mafia movie with all our vowels and our names here, but it was, it was all good. And Sal, our accountant, has been an amazing advisor to us over the years. But I mean, he was more of our accountant, not a business
Right.
advisor, not a business coach. Anybody who doesn't have a ton, and I'm talking about decades of experience. If you're going to go out and start a venture, and honestly, even if I were to start a new venture, I might consider aligning myself with a coach. We are heavily involved here in peer groups. I still participate in
Mm,
peer groups. I facilitate peer groups. Peer groups to me are an amazing way to get very direct and quick feedback from people who care about you and are invested, well, I'll say vested in your success because you in turn are giving back to them. So, I mean, that
definitely.
stuff didn't exist back then, at least for me in my space. But I wish I had leaned into getting advice or seeking advice from people who are a lot wiser and smarter than me.
For sure. For sure. I think it's super important to take advice from people who are credible and who have experience in what you want to do, and also who have your best interest in mind and
Yes,
not their best interest,
of
which I
course.
think is
Of course.
the
Yeah.
other thing.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
and you as the mentee need to discern whether or not this is, it's just like, hey, I don't know nothing about medicine, but I think I have an awesome doctor. And why? Because I'm smart enough to discern that I think he actually cares about me, and the advice I get from him isn't always tied to like, writing a prescription. That is the last thing he does for me is write a prescription, right? He gives me
yeah,
sound guidance and advice. And I feel like when I see him every however long, 18 months, that he actually cares about me.
for sure. For sure. Yeah, that's super, super important to